The people getting promoted while doing the least visible work are not lazy. That's the part everyone gets wrong. What looks like laziness from your desk is usually something else entirely, something quieter, something most people never learn to see until it's already worked against them for years. I've sat in the rooms where these decisions actually get made, and I can tell you the person doing the most work is often the last name mentioned. Not because it's fair, because of how the system actually works. And once you see it, you can't unsee it in your own career. I'm Dre. I've been close enough to promotion conversations and calibration meetings to know that what employees think gets them promoted and what actually gets them promoted are two different things. If you've been grinding for years and watching people who seem to do less move up faster, I'm not here to tell you it's fair. I'm here to tell you how it actually works, so you stop guessing and start seeing it clearly. Stick with me, because this gets more uncomfortable the deeper we go. And if you're new here, stay for a second, because by the end of this, you're going to look at your own last 12 months completely differently. Here's the first thing to understand. Promotions are not decided by adding up your hours or your output. They're decided in a room you're never in, called a calibration meeting, where managers sit across from other managers and argue for the people they want promoted. And here's the part that stings. In that room, a manager isn't remembering your effort. They're remembering moments. They're remembering the one time they could describe what you did in a single confident sentence to someone above them. Functionally, that sentence is your entire case. If you don't have one, it doesn't matter how many hours you put in. You were never in the room to begin with. This is where people misunderstand it. You assume the hardest worker is the safest bet, the most obvious pick. But a manager walking into calibration isn't thinking about who worked the most. They're thinking about who they can defend in 30 seconds without hesitating. If you spend your year quietly handling the background work that keeps a team running, and you spend that same year attached to one visible, nameable project instead, guess which version gets brought up first when the room goes quiet and someone asks, "Who's ready?" It's not usually the version that did more. It's the version whose work turned into a story someone else can retell without checking their notes. And here's a detail that surprises almost everyone the first time they hear it. The person deciding your fate in that room is not always your direct manager. Sometimes it's a skip-level manager, someone 2 levels up who barely talks to you day to day, forming an opinion off secondhand summaries and 1 or 2 interactions they happen to remember. You can do excellent work under someone who adores you and still lose the room because the person 1 level above them never got a clear enough picture to defend you when it counted. That's not a conspiracy. It's just how secondhand information travels, and it travels worse the further it gets from the actual work. Now here's the part that makes this worse, not better. That quiet, reliable work you do, the fixing, the covering, the smoothing over problems before anyone else notices them, has a name inside most companies. People in the business call it glue work. And I want to be careful here, because glue work is real, it's valuable, and most teams would fall apart without someone doing it. But almost none of it ends up in a promotion packet. There's no single sentence for kept everything from falling apart quietly in the background. So the more dependable you become, the more invisible you can become in the exact conversation that decides whether you move up. Think about what actually goes into a promotion packet. It's usually a short write-up, a handful of bullet points, maybe a project name and an outcome attached to it. Whoever builds that packet is compressing an entire year into something that fits on half a page. Fixing onboarding documentation nobody else wanted to touch does not compress well. Covering for a teammate during a rough quarter does not compress well. Smoothing over a conflict before it became a real problem does not compress well, even though every one of those things probably saved the team more time and stress than the flashy project everyone remembers. The packet rewards what fits on the page. Glue work almost never fits on the page. This is where it gets uncomfortable, because if glue work doesn't get you promoted, then the honest question is, what does? And the answer isn't what most people want to hear. It's protecting your time, your bandwidth, for the handful of things that will actually get repeated in a room you're not in. That means saying no to some of the requests that land on your desk by default. That means choosing fewer projects instead of more, and making sure the ones you do choose are visible to the person who eventually has to defend you. From a distance, that can look like doing less. From inside the decision, it often reads as confidence, prioritization, and leadership instinct. That's the real twist behind this whole title. What looks lazy from a coworker's chair can look like exactly the right instinct from a manager's chair, because the person doing it has quietly figured out that leverage matters more than volume. Let's put it plainly. Turning down 3 low-value requests to protect the time for one high-visibility deliverable is not laziness. It's a filtering system. It looks identical to avoidance from the outside, and that's exactly why coworkers misread it and start whispering that someone's coasting. But inside the calibration room, the person filtering their time correctly is usually the one with the cleanest, most repeatable story. The person absorbing everything by default is usually the one with no single sentence anyone can use. But don't relax yet, because there's a version of this that looks identical on the surface and ends in the opposite result. This is where people take the wrong lesson from what I just said and think doing less is automatically safe. It isn't. Behind the scenes, there's a second track running the entire time, separate from perception, and it's tracking whether you're actually delivering. Missed deadlines, dropped commitments, promises that quietly didn't happen. That gets written down. Sometimes it's a note after a one-on-one. Sometimes it's a pattern a manager brings to their own manager during a performance cycle. And if that pattern builds, you're not looking at a slower promotion. You're looking at a conversation that starts with concern and can end on a performance improvement track. I want to be careful here, because these two paths look almost the same from the outside. Two people can both appear to be doing less this quarter. One of them is quietly filtering their workload down to what matters and delivering it well. The other is quietly falling behind on real commitments and hoping nobody notices yet. From a coworker's view, they look interchangeable. From inside the system, one of them builds a promotion case and the other builds a paper trail that eventually turns into a difficult conversation. The visible behavior is the same. The internal record is not. I'm not saying this to scare you into working yourself into the ground again. I'm saying the real skill was never about doing less. It was always about being selective about what people never see you carrying, while making absolutely sure nothing important is quietly falling behind. This is where the boring truth reassures you a little. The system is not purely random or rigged against effort. Genuine underperformance does eventually get caught, documented, and addressed. It just doesn't get caught the way people assume, through a simple hours worked comparison. It gets caught through outcomes, not appearances. Now, here's the part companies almost never say out loud, and it's the reason this whole thing feels so confusing from where you're sitting. There is no official policy anywhere that says reward visibility over effort. No manager is going to stand in front of a team and say that out loud, because it sounds unfair, even though it's exactly how the decision gets made. So instead, you get the polished version afterward. You get, it wasn't the right timing. You get, we're still building your case. You get, there just wasn't headcount this cycle. You get a sentence engineered to be gentle instead of honest. And I want to be clear, that vagueness isn't necessarily someone lying to you. Often, it's the softened translation of the real sentence, which is closer to, I couldn't describe your impact fast enough in the room where it mattered. That's the gap between what you're told and what actually happened. And it's usually not personal. It's just easier to say than the truth. I know there's a double standard buried in all of this, and I'm not going to pretend there isn't. Companies expect employees to communicate clearly, deliver consistently, and build a visible track record, while the company itself often gives almost nothing back in the way of clear explanation. You rarely get told exactly why the decision went the other way. You get a vague sentence and a let's revisit next cycle. That's a real imbalance, and I'm not defending it. But I'm telling you how the hiring and promotion side actually reads the situation, because understanding the mechanism is the only thing that helps you navigate around it. Waiting for the system to become more transparent on its own is not a strategy. Building your own one-sentence story before someone else has to guess at it is. I know this might already sound like your own story, so let's talk about the signs, carefully, because I don't want you walking away from this convinced of something you can't actually confirm. One missed cycle means almost nothing on its own. A repeated pattern is what actually matters. If your manager rarely mentions your work in front of their own boss, if you're consistently the default person for the unglamorous tasks nobody wants their name attached to, if you get plenty of verbal praise in private, but no real traction when review season comes around, if people with less experience keep getting pulled onto the visible projects while you stay the reliable option in the background, if your manager struggles to answer specifically when you ask what your case looks like right now, that's worth paying attention to. This does not prove anything on its own, and I want to be honest about that. You cannot see the calibration room. You cannot see the exact notes attached to your name. What you can do is compare. Compare what's happening to you against what's happening to your peers over multiple cycles, not just one. Compare how specifically your manager can describe your impact versus how specifically they describe someone else's. If the pattern keeps repeating in the same direction, that's a signal worth acting on. If it's a single quiet quarter, it's probably just a quiet quarter. Here's where the boring truth becomes worse than the dramatic version people imagine. There's no secret committee deciding to hold good employees back forever. Nobody is plotting against you personally. It's something much less exciting and much more dangerous because it's structural. It's the simple fact that most companies never built a system to notice quiet excellence. They built a system that rewards whoever can be described the fastest. That's not a conspiracy. It's a blind spot. And blind spots don't apologize. They just keep repeating themselves year after year, unless you change what the room can actually see. I also want to be fair here, because it's easy to make this sound like companies always win and employees always lose. That's not accurate either. I've seen versions of this where someone who managed their visibility well still didn't get promoted because headcount got frozen, or the role above them didn't open, or a reorg happened at the exact wrong time. None of this is a perfect formula. Timing still matters. Business needs still matter. What I'm describing is the difference maker underneath all of that, not a guarantee that overrides everything else. So what do you actually do with this? Not motivational advice, just the mechanism turned into action. Stop absorbing every piece of unassigned work by default. I know it feels responsible, and I know someone has to do it, but glue work with no name attached to it will not build your case no matter how necessary it is. And every hour spent on it is an hour not spent on a thing that eventually gets you a seat in the room. Instead, trade some of that time for ownership of something visible, even if it's smaller in scope. A small project with a clear outcome beats a large amount of invisible support work every time calibration comes around. Narrate your own outcomes to your manager directly instead of assuming they'll notice on their own. They are building your one sentence whether you help them or not, and you would rather hand them the sentence than let them guess at it and get it wrong. This is not bragging. This is making sure the person who has to defend you in a room you're not in actually has something to say. Choose fewer things and make sure the ones you choose actually reach someone above your manager, because that's who eventually has to be convinced, not just your manager alone. And make sure your manager could describe your impact in one confident sentence to their own boss without hesitating, because that sentence is functionally your entire promotion packet, whether anyone ever tells you that directly or not. And to be clear, none of this means disengage or do less real work. That's the version that gets you managed out instead of promoted. The goal was never reduced effort. It was always making sure the effort that matters is the effort someone else can actually see and repeat in a room you'll never be in. So back to the title, because I told you I'd bring it full circle. Lazy people are not getting promoted faster. Visibility is. It's not laziness winning. It's a structural blind spot in how promotion decisions actually get made. One that happens to reward low visible effort combined with high perceived leverage, and quietly punishes the people doing the most necessary work in the background. It's not a cartoon conspiracy. It's not designed to hurt you specifically. But if the outcome keeps repeating itself in your career the same way, functionally, it doesn't matter whether anyone meant it that way. Be selective about what you carry. Be consistent about what you're known for. Say the sentence yourself before someone else has to guess at it. And remember that every project you take on, every task you absorb quietly, every room you're not in, becomes part of the story someone else tells about you later, whether you're there to hear it or not.